Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt. You can hear me Monday through Friday on the Salem Radio Networks, but Saturday mornings, I'm right here on MSNBC. Joined again by my panel, Sahil Kapur of Bloomberg, Ashley Parker of The Washington Post, Jake Sherman of Politico, and Niles Standish of The Hill. Looked in the first time we were talking about this as though nothing's going to happen, friends. You said no to the 21, no to the idea of arming teachers. What about fixing NICS, Niles Standish? That seems to have the Cornyn-Murphy bill. The president has nodded to it. Is that going to happen?
That has at least some chance of happening, I think, Hugh. It is a very difficult situation because of all the things that my fellow guests have said here. The stasis around this issue has been very powerful historically. Now, I think you were mentioning earlier on about President Trump and his populism or his capacity sometimes to read the pulse correctly. I think he may be right about one thing here, which is that people won't stand for inaction on this issue anymore. I do think there is popular appetite for some kind of change. Now, could the measure that you're talking about be the thing that politicians can come together on? Maybe. It's never really been a smart bet to back action, but that could have some chance of success.
Sahil, I've been urging on my radio audience that we could use something like the Kefauver Special Committee from 1951 on organized crime, a select committee of the House and Senate, to at least hear everybody out on every proposal. Is there any appetite for a serious conversation aimed at persuasion and deliberation on the Hill?
Hugh, I think there's always an appetite to talk about that issue, but once you go from that to trying to do something, you run into all sorts of obstacles. The fix NICS issue, I mean, imagine having a bill that has Chris Murphy, a prominent gun control advocate, John Cornyn, a prominent gun rights advocate, and the applauding of the NRA. That's the fix NICS bill, and even that is running into obstacles because in the House, Republican leaders have attached it to a controversial a concealed carry reciprocity bill that has basically no chance of getting 60 votes in the Senate. So, you know, those are the sorts of games that are being played, and when that happens, it's hard to see, it's not difficult to see why even very popular issues, that have pretty much consensus support fail to pass. As I mentioned, it's the mentality that today you do fix NICS or you do background checks, you ban bump stocks today, then tomorrow it's going to be a slippery slope to repealing the Second Amendment. That is the key mentality that has driven every gun debate so far.
Jake, you agree with that? You talked to Cornyn. He's a very respected figure. Chris Murphy is the voice of the New Democratic Party, might be running for president. He's got a lot of support. Is there no way to get at least the glaring omissions in the NICS system fixed?
Sahil's right. Paul Ryan has promised the conservative House Freedom Caucus and other leaders that this concealed carry bill, which allows people to carry concealed weapons across state lines, he's attached those two, and that's a big problem for getting this through because he's right. That will never get 60 votes in the Senate. I do think if President Trump is able to focus his energy on one narrow proposal to beef up background checks or to, but I'm not talking, he needs to come up with something that could get 60 votes, come up with something narrow, something specific, and then go out and push his allies. People like Mark Meadows, people like Jim Jordan, people on the right in the House, people who are looked to see whether a bill is conservative enough or constitutional enough. Go to those people and win them over on this issue. Right now, he's all over the place. I mean, just to give, you know, we have to give this some perspective here and not treat this like it's, you know, fan fiction. The president said there are enough teachers who have won sharpshooting contests, who have been in the military for 20 years, that are now teachers who can carry guns in classrooms. This is not reality. If he is able to focus his energy on a proposal that has a chance, then yes, a background check system, beefing up a background check system could actually happen.
Ashley, let me pose to you this possibility. The president is actually talking to local and state governments. He's talking to concealed carry states and to local school districts who might have indeed that former Delta Force member in the classroom who is actually equipped and trained to do this. Do you think he's talking past the Beltway to the heartland of Trump country about arming teachers and that it resonates with people?
Well, again, this is a president who, while he doesn't come from a gun culture himself, you are right that he's sort of deeply in touch with cultural issues in the way that issues like the Second Amendment move huge swaths of the country, particularly in those states that helped him win the presidency. So I do think to some extent he is channeling them, reflecting them, and playing to them. The problem is that he actually at some point has to deal with the reality, as Jake said, on the ground in this Congress, with this House, with this Senate, and figure out something that won't enrage his base, but that, you know, conservative House members and a more mixed Senate will actually pass. And there is sort of a yawning gap between those two things.
I want to finish up with you, Niall. As a son of Ulster, and you came to the United States out of a country that's just racked with violence, which way do you think this country is headed? Towards the time of the Troubles or away from them because of the emotion of the young people that we've seen on display this week?
I worry that there are conditions here for very serious political unrest, Hugh, actually. I mean, obviously this does tie into the guns issue to a large extent. Widespread gun ownership plus an extremely polarized, extremely angry country, sadly, I think is a recipe for disaster. I hope I'm wrong about that prediction, but it does trouble me quite a lot.
Niall, let me follow up on that. When you were growing up in schools, how did they protect the Northern Ireland school population from the violence that racked Ulster in those years?
Well, the violence that racked Ulster was the consequence of illegal weapons. There wasn't widespread gun ownership in Northern anywhere else in either Ireland or Britain at that time. So there were measures taken to try and, you know, make sure that people weren't targets. But the violence there tended to be more directed at participants in the conflict rather than the horrendous massacres that we see at random in this country.
It's the random victim violence that is so unsettling to America. It is not even the fanatical Islamist violence. It's very different when it's random victim violence. I want to thank my panel for, it's not a very optimistic view, but a very realistic one. Sahil and Niall, thank you. Ashley, thank you. Jake, thank you for coming in with me. I'll be right back with Hugh's Views.